She's smiling. That's the first thing you notice. Not crying, not trembling, not staring at the floor like most defendants do when they're about to hear whether they'll spend the rest of their life in prison. No, Carly Madison Gregg is smiling in that Mississippi courtroom like she's waiting for good news, like she's convinced she's going home today. And before you ask yourself how a 15-year-old could possibly smile at a moment like this, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear isn't just another true crime case. This is the story of a teenager who walked into her own bedroom and pulled the trigger 3 times. A girl who sat calmly in her kitchen for 13 minutes after killing her mother. A daughter who texted her stepfather pretending to be his wife so she could shoot him too when he came through the door. But here's what makes this case different from every other family tragedy you've heard about. Everything was caught on camera. Every step, every decision, every lie. And when that footage played in court, Carly's smile disappeared forever. If you're still watching, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happens next is going to make you question everything you think you know about teenage mental health, premeditated violence, and the terrifying power of a security camera that never stops recording. And if cases like this grip you the way they grip me, hit that subscribe button. Because we dive deep into stories that deserve to be told, stories that haunt us long after the verdict is read. Now let me take you back to March 19th, 2024, Brandon, Mississippi. A Tuesday afternoon that started like any other and ended with a crime scene so disturbing that seasoned investigators would later say they'd never seen anything quite like it. The Smiley home sits on Ashton Way, a quiet suburban street where neighbors know each other's names and kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. Inside that house lives Ashley Smiley, a 40-year-old math teacher beloved by her students. Her husband Heath, a calm, gentle man who married Ashley in 2020 and tried his best to be a good stepfather. And Ashley's daughter, Carly Gregg, a bright 14-year-old honor student who seemed to have everything going for her. But by mid-morning on March 19th, something had already started to unravel. A friend of Carly's approached Ashley at Northwest Rankin High School, where both Ashley taught and Carly attended. The friend was worried. Carly had been vaping marijuana regularly. She had burner phones her parents didn't know about. She'd been talking to boys online, older boys, boys Ashley had never met. Ashley wasn't furious when she heard this. People who spoke to her that day said she seemed more concerned than angry, more worried about her daughter's well-being than upset about the rule-breaking itself. But she knew she had to act. She knew she had to go home and search Carly's room and have one of those hard conversations that every parent dreads. School ended, Ashley and Carly drove home together. And this is where the security cameras pick up the story. 3:54 p.m. Ashley's car pulls into the garage. She and Carly get out, walk inside, bring the family's 2 dogs in from the yard. Nothing in the footage suggests tension. No argument, no raised voices, just a mother and daughter coming home on a Tuesday afternoon. But you need to understand the layout of this house because it matters. The garage connects to a small laundry room. The laundry room opens into the kitchen. To the right of the kitchen is Carly's bedroom. To the left, down a hallway, is the master bedroom where Ashley and Heath sleep. And throughout the house, security cameras are recording everything. The garage, the kitchen, the laundry room, every moment uploading to the cloud in real time. Ashley heads to Carly's bedroom to search for the vape pens and marijuana. Carly takes the dogs outside to the backyard. For a few minutes, everything is quiet, normal, routine. Then, Carly comes back inside. The kitchen camera captures her walking slowly through the room. She's not rushed, Not panicked, she moves with purpose, glancing toward her bedroom, where she knows her mother is going through her things. Then she turns and walks in the opposite direction, toward the master bedroom. At approximately 4 p.m., Carly entered her parents' bedroom and retrieved her mother's .357 Magnum handgun from under the mattress. She concealed the weapon behind her back as she moved through the house. Think about that for a second. A 14-year-old girl knows exactly where her mother keeps a loaded handgun. She knows how to handle it. She knows what she's about to do with it. And the camera captures her walking back across the house, her right arm held awkwardly behind her back, hiding the weapon from view. She pauses at the entrance to the kitchen, looks inside, checking to make sure Ashley hasn't left the bedroom. Then she walks into her own room. 3 shots echo through the home. Ashley Smiley is struck multiple times. The medical examiner would later testify about each bullet's trajectory. The first shot hit Ashley in the shoulder, the second hit her in the neck. Either of those wounds could have been fatal. But the third shot, fired from less than 3 feet away, struck Ashley directly in the face, just above her right eye. And if you're feeling sick right now, if you're wondering how a child could do this to her own mother, stay with me. Because what Carly does next is somehow even more chilling than the shooting itself.
She walks calmly back to the kitchen, and she sits down. The timestamp on the security footage is crucial here. Ashley was shot sometime between 4:03 and 4:07 p.m. Carly didn't contact 911 until 4:57 p.m. That's 13 minutes. 13 minutes where Carly is alone in the house with her mother's body. 13 minutes where she doesn't try to help, doesn't call for an ambulance, doesn't run to a neighbor's house screaming for someone to save her mom. Instead, she picks up her mother's iPhone from the kitchen counter. She knows Ashley's passcode. She unlocks the phone, opens the messaging app, and texts Heath Smiley. "When will you be home, honey?" Honey. That's what Ashley calls Heath. Carly is impersonating her mother, making Heath think everything is normal at home, convincing him to come back. And when Heath responds that he'll be home in about an hour, Carly sends back a thumbs-up emoji. Then she starts calling her friends. Multiple FaceTime calls in the minutes after killing her mother. She's crying now, upset, telling them she's really messed up, that she's done something terrible. When one friend asks if they should call 911, Carly says no. Don't do that. Don't call anyone. Instead, she invites a specific friend to come over. When that friend arrives at the house, Carly opens the door and asks a question that will haunt that friend for the rest of her life. Do dead bodies make you squeamish? Carly takes her friend inside, shows her Ashley's body lying on the floor of Carly's bedroom. The friend testified later that she was terrified, frozen, not knowing what to do or how to process what she was seeing. But Carly isn't done explaining. She tells her friend something that proves this wasn't a moment of temporary insanity or a psychotic break. "I put 3 in my mom. I've got 3 more for my stepdad. He's on his way home now." If you're still watching, type the word justice in the comments if you think Carly knew exactly what she was doing. Type mental health if you think something else was going on here. Because the question of whether Carly was sane or sick becomes the entire focus of this case. But right now, in this moment, she's telling her friend to go hide in the backyard, because when Heath gets home, she's going to finish what she started. Before he arrives, Carly does something investigators would later describe as deeply disturbing. She repositions her mother's body, folds Ashley's hands across her stomach like she's laying her in a coffin, drapes a red towel over her mother's face to cover the gunshot wound. And as the minutes pass, the kitchen camera picks up something else. Carly quietly humming and singing to herself while her mother's body lies in the next room. Heath Smiley leaves work around 5 p.m. He got the text from what he thought was his wife asking when he'd be home. Everything seemed normal. He has no reason to suspect anything is wrong, no reason to think that the moment he opens his front door, his stepdaughter will be waiting with a gun. When Heath pulls into the driveway and walks toward the door that leads into the laundry room and kitchen, Carly is already in position. As soon as he steps inside, she fires. One of the bullets hits Heath in the shoulder, inches from his face. Even though he's in pain, bleeding, confused, Heath reacts on instinct. He's bigger and stronger than Carly. He rushes toward her and tries to grab the gun. During the struggle, more shots go off. Heath later said he wasn't sure who fired those last bullets. All he could think about was getting the weapon away from her. The whole time, Carly is screaming, not words, just screaming. Heath would later tell the court that the sound was wild and terrifying, completely unlike anything he had ever heard from her before. He eventually wrenches the gun from her hands. The moment he does, Carly runs out the back door. Her friend chases after her, and Heath, still in shock, still bleeding, starts looking around the house. At first, he can't believe what just happened. He thinks someone else must have attacked Carly, that she was only trying to protect herself. Then he enters Carly's bedroom. That's where he finds Ashley. He immediately pulls out his phone and dials 911. And if you want to understand the raw horror of this moment, listen to what Heath says when the dispatcher answers. "Your daughter tried to shoot you?" "Yeah, she was shooting at me. She killed her mom, but tried to kill me." "What's her name?" "Carly Gregg." "Hey, I need you to talk to me. What is she wearing?" "She was in jeans and a grayish t-shirt. She's got short brownish hair. She ran into the backyard. I tried to follow her. She jumped the fence and ran." "She shot you?" "Yeah." Heath's voice is shaking. He's trying to stay calm, but you can hear the disbelief, the devastation, the realization that the girl he tried to help raise just tried to murder him after killing her own mother. Paramedics and police arrive within minutes. The quiet street on Ashton Way is flooded with emergency vehicles. While first responders treat Heath and secure the house, other officers begin searching the neighborhood for Carly. A deputy patrolling Farmington Boulevard, just a few streets away, spots a young girl standing near a drainage ditch. She looks small for her age, disoriented, frightened. It's Carly. The deputy approaches cautiously. Carly acknowledges being involved in the incident. She's handcuffed and placed in the back of the patrol car. And while sitting there, she keeps asking if Heath is okay, if he's going to survive. Officers stop the car to perform a gunshot residue test on her hands. Carly is calm now, quiet, almost detached, as if the screaming girl who fired 6 shots in her own home has disappeared entirely. But back at the house, investigators are uncovering a crime scene that will make this one of the most documented family murders in recent history. Security footage from multiple cameras, text messages impersonating Ashley, phone records showing calls to friends, physical evidence everywhere. When they piece it all together, the timeline is undeniable. The actions are clear. The planning is obvious. What they can't figure out, and what will become the central question at trial, is why. Why would a 14-year-old honor student execute her own mother and then try to kill the stepdad who'd done nothing but support her? Before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. If this case is gripping you the way it's gripping me, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this. Stories that matter. Stories that make us ask hard questions about justice, mental health, and how far the law should go when the person holding the gun is still just a child. And drop a comment telling me your first instinct. Was this premeditated murder or a mental health crisis? Because the answer to that question will determine whether Carly spends 40 years in prison or the rest of her life. Carly Madison Gregg was initially taken to a juvenile detention facility, but that didn't last long. Given the severity of the charges, prosecutors made the decision to charge her as an adult. She faced 3 counts: first-degree murder for killing Ashley Smiley, attempted murder for shooting Heath Smiley, and tampering with evidence for trying to hide what she'd done. Under Mississippi law, first-degree murder carries only two possible sentences: life in prison with the possibility of parole, or life without parole. Because Carly was a juvenile, the death penalty wasn't an option. But being charged as an adult meant something else. It meant Carly would be held in an adult facility, and because she was still a minor, she had to be kept separate from adult inmates. In practice, this meant solitary confinement. For the next 6 months, from March 2024 until her trial in September, Carly Madison Gregg spent 23 to 24 hours a day alone in a cell. No contact with other inmates, limited contact with guards. Her only regular visitors were her attorneys. The isolation was crushing, especially for a 14-year-old who was already struggling with anxiety, depression, and voices in her head that wouldn't stop. Her defense team argued that these conditions were making her worse, that keeping a child in solitary confinement was cruel and violated her rights. But the judge ruled that there was no alternative. Mississippi law required juvenile offenders charged as adults to be kept separate from the adult population. If that meant solitary, so be it. Meanwhile, both sides were preparing for trial, and they were building completely opposite narratives of who Carly Gregg was and what happened on March 19th. The prosecution story was simple. Carly Gregg was a teenager living a double life, using drugs, talking to boys online, hiding burner phones from her parents. When her mother found out and started searching her room, Carly made a cold, calculated decision to end her mother's life. The calmness on the security footage proved she knew what she was doing. The text messages to Heath showed planning and deception. The way she positioned Ashley's body showed a disturbing lack of remorse. And the attempt to shoot Heath proved this wasn't just a single moment of losing control. It was a deliberate plan to eliminate both her parents. Yes, Carly had some mental health struggles: anxiety, depression, self-harm, normal teenage problems that millions of kids deal with every day. But nothing that meant she was legally insane. She knew the difference between right and wrong. She knew killing someone was wrong, and the fact that she tried to cover up what she did proved she understood it was illegal. The defense's narrative was completely different. Carly Gregg was a deeply mentally ill child who'd been suffering for years with conditions nobody fully understood. She had a genetic predisposition to serious psychiatric illness inherited from her biological father, who had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. She'd been hearing voices since she was young, possibly as early as age 9. She'd been experiencing dissociation, a terrifying condition where reality doesn't feel real anymore. She had intrusive thoughts that scared her. She'd been cutting herself for years as a way to cope with overwhelming emotions. Then, just 6 days before the murder, her medication was changed from Zoloft to Lexapro. For someone with underlying bipolar disorder, switching antidepressants can trigger manic episodes or worsen psychotic symptoms. By March 19th, Carly was in the midst of a full psychotic break. Under Mississippi law, to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, the defense had to prove that, at the time of the crime, Carly didn't understand what she was doing or didn't know it was wrong. It's an incredibly high bar to meet. Insanity defenses succeed in less than 1% of criminal cases. But Carly's defense team believed they had the evidence. And if they succeeded, Carly wouldn't go to prison. She'd be committed to a mental health facility for treatment. Eventually, if she stabilized and was no longer considered dangerous, she could potentially be released. But first, they'd have to convince a jury. Before that decision was made, the prosecution made an offer. In August 2024, a few weeks before trial, the district attorney offered a plea deal. Carly could plead guilty to all charges, and the state would recommend a 40-year sentence. 40 years. For a 14-year-old, that meant she wouldn't be released until she was 54. She would spend her entire youth and most of her adult life behind bars. But when it came time to decide, Carly did something no one expected. "Ms. Gregg, did you receive that recommendation of 40 years?" "Yes, sir." "And it was your choice and your choice alone to reject that recommendation?" "Yes, Your Honor." At just 14 years old, Carly Madison Gregg decided to take her chances with the jury instead of accepting a 40-year sentence. Her attorneys supported her choice. They believed they had a strong mental health defense, that once the jury heard about Carly's history, once they heard from psychiatric experts, they would see this as a case of a troubled young girl who needed help, not someone acting out of cruelty or calculation. But that meant everything would come down to the trial. And the trial would come down to one thing: that security footage. The footage that captured every step Carly took, every decision she made, every moment of calm as she sat in the kitchen after pulling the trigger 3 times. And when that video played in court, when the jury watched Carly walk through her house with a gun hidden behind her back, when they heard her texting Heath pretending to be his wife, when they heard her humming to herself while her mother lay dead in the next room, everything changed. If you're still here, if you need to know how this ends, stay with me. Because what happens in that courtroom, the moment Carly's smile finally disappears, is something you won't forget, and neither will she.
The trial of Carly Madison Gregg began in September 2024, 6 months after the shooting. 6 months after a 14-year-old girl walked into her bedroom and changed 3 lives forever. Carly sat at the defense table, flanked by her attorneys. She looked even younger than 14, small, fragile. Throughout the trial, she would be seen crying frequently, covering her ears during particularly difficult testimony, appearing genuinely distressed by what was being shown and said. To some observers, she looked like a broken child. To others, she looked like someone performing remorse she didn't actually feel. The prosecution opened with a simple but devastating question. How does a teenager go from honor student to murderer in the span of one afternoon? And their answer was just as simple. Carly Gregg knew exactly what she was doing. She planned it. She executed it. She tried to cover it up, and then she tried to kill again. They brought in witnesses who described Carly as intelligent, polite, and high-achieving. A girl who understood consequences, who understood right from wrong, who'd never shown signs of psychosis or delusion before March 19th. Even her therapist, who'd been treating her in the months leading up to the murder, testified that Carly had never mentioned hearing voices or experiencing hallucinations. Then came the security footage. If you've made it this far, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. Because cases like this, cases that make us question everything we think we know about justice and mental health and the limits of childhood, these are the stories we tell here. Stories that matter, stories that stay with you. And I need you here for the next one. When the prosecution played the footage for the jury, the courtroom went silent. You could see Carly on screen walking through her house, calm, methodical, hiding the gun behind her back, pausing to check if her mother was still in the bedroom, then walking into that room and firing 3 times. No hesitation, no panic, just action. Then the aftermath. Carly sitting at the kitchen counter, unlocking her mother's phone, typing out that text message to Heath, using the word honey because that's what Ashley always called him. Waiting, calling her friends, inviting one over, positioning her mother's body like she was preparing it for a funeral. And that humming, that quiet humming captured by the audio feed. The jury watched all of it, and you could see it on their faces, the horror, the disbelief, the question forming in every mind. How? But the defense wasn't done, not even close. Attorney Bridget Todd stood and addressed the jury with emotion in her voice. She told them that what they'd just seen wasn't the actions of a cold-blooded killer. It was the behavior of a deeply sick child whose mind had broken under the weight of untreated mental illness and a dangerous medication change. Carly's biological father, Kevin Gregg, had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He'd struggled with severe mental health issues and drug use for years. Carly had inherited that genetic vulnerability. She'd been hearing voices since she was 9 years old, voices that scared her, voices that told her terrible things. She'd been dissociating, experiencing derealization, feeling like the world around her wasn't real.
She'd been cutting herself, writing in her journal about psychotic breaks and violent thoughts. And just 1 week before the shooting, she'd written something chilling. "I think I had a psychotic break earlier. The whole ordeal is quite silly. I actually spoke with one of the voices in my head. My particular friend and I were practically screaming bloodthirstily and ravenously. Thank God physical confrontation was not possible. I sound crazy." The defense argued that this wasn't someone creating an alibi. This was a child crying out for help, a child whose brain was misfiring in dangerous ways. And then 6 days before the murder, her medication was switched from Zoloft to Lexapro. For someone with underlying bipolar disorder, that kind of change can trigger mania, psychosis, violence. By March 19th, Carly wasn't in control anymore. She wasn't making rational decisions. She was in the grip of a mental health crisis so severe that she couldn't distinguish reality from delusion. The defense brought in psychiatric experts who'd examined Carly after her arrest. They testified about her family history, her symptoms, the medication change. They described a girl who'd been drowning in mental illness for years, while everyone around her mistook it for normal teenage angst. And they made a powerful argument. If Carly truly understood what she was doing, if she truly knew it was wrong, why would she call her friend and show her the body? Why would she position Ashley's hands and cover her face like she was preparing her for burial? Why would she keep asking if Heath was okay after she shot him? Because her mind was fractured. Because she was experiencing a psychotic break so complete that her actions stopped making sense. Not because she's evil, because she's sick. If you're following this closely, drop a comment right now telling me what you think. Do you believe Carly was insane? Do you think she knew what she was doing? Because the jury had to answer that exact question, and their answer would determine everything. The prosecution wasn't swayed. They called their own psychiatric experts, 4 specialists who'd also examined Carly, and every single one of them came to the same conclusion. Carly Gregg was not legally insane. She had anxiety, she had depression, she'd engaged in self-harm. All of that was true. But none of it rose to the level of psychosis that would prevent her from understanding reality. The medication change from Zoloft to Lexapro was standard practice. The dosage was appropriate. There was no evidence it could cause a psychotic break in someone without pre-existing severe mental illness. And even if Carly had been hearing voices, that alone doesn't meet the legal standard for insanity. She still knew what she was doing. She still knew it was wrong. The proof? The text message to Heath. The attempt to lure him home. The calm demeanor on the security footage. The fact that she ran when Heath took the gun away. If she truly didn't understand reality, if she truly didn't know killing was wrong, why would she try to cover it up? Why would she flee? Then came the most emotional testimony of the trial. Heath Smiley took the stand. Heath had to relive the worst day of his life in front of a courtroom full of strangers. He had to describe coming home from work, opening the door, and being shot by his stepdaughter. He had to describe the struggle to get the gun away from her, the screaming, the sound that still haunts him. And then he had to describe finding Ashley. When you saw her laying there, what's the very next thing you did? Checked her pulse and moved the towel, and then called 911. And Heath, when you moved the towel, what did you see? I knew she had been shot. There was blood around her face, somewhere in the right side of her face. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Carly crying at the defense table. Whether those tears were genuine grief or performative remorse, no one could say for certain. But they didn't erase the facts. They didn't erase the security footage. They didn't bring Ashley back. The trial lasted days. Witnesses testified, experts argued, the jury listened. And when it was finally time for closing arguments, both sides made their final case. The prosecution reminded the jury of the evidence, the planning, the deception, the calmness, the second attack on Heath. They said this wasn't a mental health crisis, this was premeditated murder followed by attempted murder, and Carly Gregg needed to be held accountable.
The defense reminded the jury of Carly's age, her history, her genetic predisposition, the voices she'd been hearing for years. They said this tragedy destroyed 3 lives: Ashley's, Heath's, and Carly's. And that what looked like planning was actually confusion. What looked like calmness was actually dissociation. They asked the jury to see Carly not as a monster, but as a sick 14-year-old who needed help, not a lifetime behind bars. Then the jury left to deliberate. And here's where the story takes a turn that shocked everyone in that courtroom. The jury came back in less than 2 hours. 2 hours for a case this complex. A case involving mental health defenses, expert testimony, security footage, and the question of whether a child can truly be held responsible for something this horrific. 2 hours was a clear sign that the jury had reached a firm consensus. The verdict was read. We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of first-degree murder as charged. We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of attempted murder as charged. We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of tampering with evidence as charged. Guilty on all counts. The insanity defense had been fully rejected. The jury agreed with the prosecution. Carly knew exactly what she was doing. She understood right from wrong, and she chose to pull that trigger anyway. But the trial wasn't over, because under Mississippi law, the same jury that convicts also decides the sentence. And they had 3 options: life with the possibility of parole, life without parole, or leaving the decision to the judge. If you're still with me, if this case is affecting you the way it's affecting me, take a second and hit that like button. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're thinking about this, about what justice means when the person standing trial is still just a child. And tell me in the comments what you would have decided if you were on that jury. Because what they decided next is something Carly will live with for the rest of her life. The sentencing phase began. The prosecution argued for life without parole. They said Carly's actions weren't impulsive, they were calculated. She killed her mother, tried to kill her stepfather, showed no real remorse, and posed a danger to society. Letting her out even decades from now would be a risk no one should take. The defense begged for mercy. They argued that Carly was 15 years old, that her brain wasn't fully developed, that she'd already spent 6 months in solitary confinement, a punishment many consider torture even for adults. They said she deserved a chance at rehabilitation, a chance to get the mental health treatment she desperately needed, a chance to one day, maybe, become something other than the girl who killed her mother at 14. The jury deliberated again, and when they came back, their decision was final. As to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As to count 2, we, the jury, sentence the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Life without parole. For both counts, running concurrently, which means Carly Madison Gregg, at just 15 years old, will spend the rest of her life in prison. She will never walk free. She will never go to college, never have a career, never start a family, never experience life outside of a cell. She will die in prison. The courtroom reacted with mixed emotions. Ashley Smiley's family felt justice had been served. Others, including some who believed Carly was guilty, were heartbroken that a child would spend her entire life behind bars. Carly wept quietly as deputies led her away, back to the detention center where she would remain until she turned 18. Then she'd be transferred to an adult prison, the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility, where she would spend the next 60, 70, maybe 80 years. And that smile she wore at the beginning of the trial, the one that made people wonder if she truly understood the gravity of what she'd done, it was gone.
replaced by the realization.
Replaced by the realization that she would never go home. Not that day, not ever. But this story doesn't end with the verdict. Carly's father, Kevin Gregg, spoke to the media after the trial. He believed his daughter's illness was inherited, that the system failed her long before the tragedy, that a child with her history should never have been tried as an adult. He's probably still asking himself if things could have been different, if someone had recognized the signs earlier, if the medication had been managed better, if Carly had gotten the help she needed before it was too late. Carly's defense team filed a motion for a new trial. They argued that key mental health evidence had been excluded, specifically Kevin's testimony about Carly's childhood hallucinations. They said the jury should have heard that Carly had been hearing voices since she was 9, that it wasn't something that started suddenly at 14. But Judge Dewey Arthur denied the motion. He ruled that even if that evidence had been admitted, it wouldn't have changed the verdict. The security footage was too damning, the actions too deliberate, the jury's decision too clear. The defense has since appealed to the Mississippi Court of Appeals, but overturning a verdict like this is rare, extremely rare. Even if the appeal is successful, it wouldn't mean freedom for Carly. It would mean another trial, another jury, another chance to argue that she was sick, not evil. But the odds are not in her favor. For now, Carly remains in a youth correctional facility in Pearl, Mississippi. When she turns 18, she'll be moved to the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility, where she will live among adult inmates for the rest of her life. She'll look up in a cell, eat in a cell, age in a cell, and eventually die in a cell. Her attorney, Bridget Todd, insists the system failed Carly, that a mentally ill child should never have been tried as an adult, that life without parole for a juvenile is cruel and unusual punishment, that Carly deserved treatment, not life imprisonment. The prosecution maintains that justice was done, that Carly planned her actions, that she understood what she was doing, that she killed her mother and tried to kill her stepfather, and that the security footage, the text messages, the timeline, all of it proved beyond any doubt that this wasn't a psychotic break. It was murder. So where does that leave us?
Here's what we know. Ashley Smiley, a beloved math teacher and devoted mother, is dead, killed by her own daughter. Heath Smiley, a man who tried to be a good stepfather, will carry physical and emotional scars for the rest of his life. And Carly Madison Gregg, a girl who once had a promising future, will spend the rest of her life behind bars. But here's what we don't know. Could this have been prevented? If Carly had received better mental health care earlier, would Ashley still be alive? If the medication change had been handled differently, would March 19th have been just another Tuesday? If someone had recognized the severity of Carly's symptoms, could this family have been saved? We'll never know. And that's the tragedy that haunts this case. Not just what happened, but what might have been. If you followed Carly's story to the end, if this case has moved you, made you think, made you question what justice really means, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this video. Let people know that stories like this matter, that they deserve to be told with respect and honesty and depth. And subscribe if you haven't already, because we have more stories that deserve to be heard. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Do you believe Carly was mentally ill and the system failed her? Or do you believe she knew exactly what she was doing and deserved the sentence she got? Do you think a 15-year-old should ever receive life without parole? Or do you think some crimes are so severe that age doesn't matter? And tell me this. What's the lesson here? Is it about mental health? Is it about gun safety? Is it about the limits of parental oversight? Is it about the justice system's treatment of juveniles? Because I think it's about all of those things. And none of them. I think it's about how fragile life is. How quickly everything can fall apart. How a single moment can destroy everything. Ashley Smiley will never teach another math class. She'll never hug her daughter again. She'll never grow old with Heath. She's gone. And nothing, not a verdict, not a sentence, not a lifetime of punishment for Carly, will ever bring her back. Heath Smiley has to live with the knowledge that the girl he tried to help raise is the same girl who tried to kill him. He has to live with the memory of finding Ashley's body. He has to live with the sound of Carly's screaming echoing in his mind. And he has to somehow find a way to move forward when everything he loved was taken from him in a single afternoon. And Carly Madison Gregg has to live with what she did. Whether she was sick or sane, whether she was in control or lost in psychosis, the result is the same. She killed her mother, she tried to kill her stepfather, and now she'll spend the next 70 years or more watching life pass by through prison bars.
There are no winners here. No happy endings. Just 3 destroyed lives and a community left wondering how this could have happened in their quiet suburban neighborhood where kids ride bikes and neighbors know each other's names. Before we close, I want you to think about something. The security camera footage that convicted Carly, that showed every step she took, every decision she made, was supposed to make the house safer. It was supposed to protect the family. Instead, it became the most damning evidence against a 14-year-old girl who may or may not have understood what she was doing when she pulled that trigger. Technology captured everything, but it couldn't explain everything. It couldn't tell us what was going on inside Carly's head when she walked into that bedroom. It couldn't tell us if the voices she claimed to hear were real or fabricated. It couldn't tell us if switching medications 6 days earlier had pushed her over an edge she'd been teetering on for years. All it could do was show us what happened, not why. And maybe that's the most important thing to understand about this case. We have all the facts. We have the footage. We have the timeline. We have the verdict. But we still don't have the answer to the question that matters most. Why did this happen? Was it mental illness that went untreated for too long? Was it a calculated act by a troubled teenager who wanted to escape consequences? Was it the tragic result of genetic predisposition meeting environmental stress, meeting a medication change at exactly the wrong moment? Or was it something else entirely? Something we'll never fully understand because we can't see inside another person's mind. The jury decided Carly knew what she was doing. The law says she's guilty. The sentence says she'll never be free. But does that mean we understand? Does that mean justice has truly been served? Or does it just mean we've locked away a problem we don't know how to solve? I'll leave you with one final thought. Whether you believe Carly was sick or evil, whether you think the sentence was just or cruel, whether you have sympathy for her or none at all, remember this. Ashley Smiley didn't deserve to die. Heath Smiley didn't deserve to be shot in his own home. And somewhere in the middle of all this tragedy is a 14-year-old girl who, for reasons we may never fully comprehend, made a choice that destroyed everything. If this case has affected you, if it's made you think about mental health, about juvenile justice, about the responsibilities we have to recognize and treat mental illness before it leads to tragedy, then share this video. Let other people grapple with these questions. Let them decide for themselves what justice looks like when the defendant is still just a child. Thank you for following Carly Madison Gregg's story to the end. Thank you for being here. Thank you for thinking critically about a case that has no easy answers. Hit that subscribe button if you want more deep dives into cases that challenge everything we think we know about crime, punishment, and the human mind. And drop one final comment telling me your ultimate takeaway from this story. What will you remember most? What question will keep you up tonight? For me, it's this. When we look at Carly Gregg sitting in that courtroom, smiling before the video played, what were we really seeing? Delusion? Denial? Insanity? Or just a child who hadn't yet grasped that her life as she knew it was already over? The smile is gone now. It disappeared the moment reality hit. The moment Carly understood that the jury didn't believe her, that the security footage had told a story she couldn't rewrite, that she wasn't going home that day or any day after. And in that moment, when the smile faded and the tears came, we saw something else. Not a monster, not a victim, not a cold-blooded killer or a mentally ill child, just a 15-year-old girl facing the fact that she would spend the rest of her life paying for what happened on March 19th, 2024. Whether that's justice or tragedy, I'll let you decide. This is the story of Carly Madison Gregg, the girl who smiled in court until reality played on video, the daughter who killed her mother and tried to kill her stepfather, the teenager who will die in prison for crimes she committed at 14. Her story is over. Her life, in every meaningful sense, ended the day Ashley Smiley's did. But the questions her case raises, about mental health, about juvenile justice, about the way we treat children who commit unthinkable acts, those questions remain, and they deserve answers. Even if those answers are hard, even if they make us uncomfortable, even if they force us to acknowledge that sometimes there are no good solutions, only terrible choices and the people left behind to live with them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for remembering that behind every true crime story is a real family whose lives were shattered. Ashley Smiley deserves to be remembered as more than a victim. She was a teacher, a mother, a wife, a person who made a difference in her students' lives, and her loss leaves a hole that can never be filled. Rest in peace, Ashley. And may the rest of us learn something from the tragedy of what happened in your home on that Tuesday in March. If you made it to the end, type the word remembered in the comments, because that's what this is really about. Making sure these stories aren't forgotten. Making sure these lives mattered. Making sure we keep asking the hard questions even when the answers hurt. Until the next story, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please reach out for help. Because sometimes the difference between tragedy and survival is just one person who cares enough to notice. One person who asks the right question. One person who says, I see you're hurting and I want to help. Don't let that person be you in regret. Be that person in time. I'll see you in the next one.